There's no point backing away from what you did. You told people to vote for reform. It's the most elite party in the UK. It has 5 MPs. 4 of the 5 Reform Party MPs are Richard Tice, private schoolboy, multimillionaire CEO. Nigel Farage, private schoolboy, city trader. Rupert Lowe, private schoolboy, investment banker. James McMurdoch, investment banker. I found your elite, Matt. They're called the Reform Party.
It's also...
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, welcome. You picked a good one to start with. Today, we're diving into one of the most intellectually dishonest arguments I've seen in a political debate in a long time. We're talking about someone who claims to represent ordinary people against the elite, while literally speaking at Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan. The mental gymnastics are Olympic level. This is about how the definition of elite gets weaponized in modern politics, and how some people conveniently exclude billionaires and prime ministers from that definition, while including TV presenters and football pundits. Yeah, you heard that right. We're breaking down this debate in 3 parts, and I promise you, the contradictions just keep getting more obvious as it goes on. This is the kind of stuff that makes you understand how political manipulation actually works in real time. Make sure you watch until the end. Please comment down where you are watching from. It's great to see people from over the world connecting in here. All right, now let's get into the video.
Welcome back to Head to Head on Al Jazeera English. My guest today is the author Matthew Goodwin. We've been talking about immigration, populism, the riots here in the UK. We're going to hear in this half from our very patient audience here in London's Conway Hall. But before we get to them, Matt, let's talk about the broader point you make in the book and elsewhere. See, I'm 45 years old. You're 2 years younger than me, I think. In my lifetime, our lifetime, the Conservatives have governed this country for 32 years. That's more than 2/3 of the time that you and I have been alive. But according to you, we've been governed by a liberal elite for 50 years. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Well, I don't actually quite say that. What I'm saying...
You literally said that. You literally said that. For much of the last 50 years. Your words in your book.
What I'm saying is, there is an old elite that is still very visible. But what I'm arguing is, within the elite in this country and all Western democracies, there is now a battle underway, and the new elite, which is not really defining itself by wealth and money, it is defining itself by its social liberalism, its radical woke progressivism, comes from universities, affluent families, lives in the cities.
But they haven't ruled the country for 50 years, have they?
They wield now, unlike anything we've seen before.
But you didn't say now. You said much of the last 50 years.
The creative industries, the universities, production, television, publishing, they've amassed immense cultural power.
I'm not disputing the cultural power. I'm saying
you said the national conversation.
But not for the last 50 years. That's just wrong. Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister.
It depends. I mean, Daniel Bell was writing in the 1970s, an academic, and
there was no elite running this country that was a liberal elite in the 80s. Not true.
What he said is the elite class, this is an important point, unlike the old elite, today's elite derive their status by denigrating their own country, denigrating the West. They derive their status by saying, actually, I am institutionally
Hold on. Are you in the new elite? Are you in the new elite?
I would say I'm a renegade member of the university class. That's what I would say.
But you're not in the new elite?
Well, my family are all working class.
But are you in the new elite?
I don't really think so.
Because you just said the new elite denigrate this country. I saw a tweet from you where you said London's a hole. Well, sounds like you're the one denigrating the country, not the social
I hate to
class.
break the news, but London is not the country.
London is the capital city of this country.
I've been coming in and out of London for 40 years.
Fair enough.
You and I both know London is not what it used to be.
In what world? I think it's better. In what world is Carol Vorderman, the TV presenter who did Sums on Countdown, or Gary Lineker, a footballer who not only didn't go to Oxbridge, which is part of your definition, he didn't go to any university? How are they the new elite? The ruling class, while Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson, multimillionaires who were literally Prime Minister, they're not the elite, but Lineker and Vorderman are. This sounds ridiculous as a definition.
Of course they are.
Just people you disagree with.
As you know, there is competition within the elite. There are different groups of elites.
How is Lineker in the elite? He didn't go to university.
Gary Lineker has immense cultural power.
But he didn't go to university. Your definition is Oxbridge or Russell Group. I've read your definition.
As you know, in all things there are outliers. But there are conservatives as well as Labour people. You can point to conservatives, I'm sure. Let's think about somebody who is actually away from the vibes-based policy. I actually thought Boris Johnson was kind of like a bohemian liberal, really.
I just find this definition of an elite that just pulls in TV presenters but excludes bankers and prime ministers to be a very odd definition. In fact, you've said that I'm in the new elite. Yeah, I read your Sun piece. Yeah. You said I'm in the new elite, which is hilarious because out of the two of us, You're the guy who has sat on government commissions. You're the guy who dances with politicians at parties. You say on your website that you've privately briefed prime ministers and presidents. You've been invited to speak at the US State Department, the European Commission, Google, Deutsche Bank, UBS, JP Morgan, Rothschild, Trilateral Commission, and Goldman Sachs. I haven't been invited to speak at any of those places. So how am I the elite and you're not?
Well, firstly...
Okay, so Matthew Goodwin wants us to believe that Gary Lineker and Carol Vorderman are the real elites running Britain, not the actual prime ministers and billionaires. Let that sink in for a second. A football pundit who didn't even go to university is somehow more elite than Rishi Sunak, a literal multimillionaire who was prime minister. The mental gymnastics here are wild. Mehdi absolutely demolished this argument, and I'm here for it. When Matthew says the new elite has ruled for 50 years and Mehdi immediately calls him out. Margaret Thatcher was prime minister. That's the moment you see the whole argument collapse. Because it's true, the Conservatives governed for 32 out of the last 45 years, but somehow we've been ruled by a liberal elite? Make it make sense. And then comes the knockout punch. Mehdi lists everywhere Matthew has spoken. Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, UBS, Rothschild, the Trilateral Commission, briefing prime ministers and presidents. Meanwhile, Mehdi hasn't been invited to any of those places. So who's really the elite here? The guy dancing with politicians at parties and whispering in the ears of power, or the journalist challenging them? Matthew's response is so telling. He pivots to, we don't share the same values. That's it. That's the whole definition. The new elite is just people Matthew disagrees with politically. It has nothing to do with actual power, actual wealth, or actual influence. It's purely ideological. If you're progressive, you're elite. If you're conservative and speaking at Goldman Sachs, you're somehow a man of the people. This is the trick they always pull, redefine elite to mean cultural instead of economic power, so they can exclude all the actual elites who agree with them politically.
As you know, we don't share the same sets of values, and I would argue your values reflect this new elite.
So now you're defining elites based on just people you disagree with, which is what I said 2 minutes ago. It's not based on any kind of actual life experience.
I think you derive a sense of moral righteousness, a sense of grandiosity.
As do you. Both of us do as opinion formers.
By projecting a set of socially liberal, radically progressive values. You're quite sceptical of, let's say, Western nations, history, and so forth. And I think in the axis of elite competition, your group are winning at the moment. I think they are accumulating lots of cultural power.
Really? But how come you're the one who's speaking at Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, UBS, Rothschild, Deutsche Bank? That's not elite. Those are not the elite. I love the way you just airbrush the financial elites, the people with all the money from any discussion.
No,
very convenient.
I'm very critical of some of those people.
Then why are you speaking at all the banks?
If you want to understand why so many people in the West are turning to Trump, are turning to Le Pen, are turning to the AfD, are turning to Nigel Farage, I'll give you one reason. It's because what's happened is much of the elite class has moved so far to the cultural left on gender issues. Little boys can become girls and little girls can become boys, on hating Western countries and their history, on saying that we should be ashamed of who we are. Most voters do not think like that. So what I'm arguing is if the elite class wants to stop this populist rebellion, they need to get back in touch.
And I'm saying to you that your elite class definition is nonsensical. You are a Reform Party supporter. You mentioned Farage, just to be clear. This is the most elite party in the UK,
Well, I'm not actually a member of the Reform Party.
You literally told people to vote for Reform.
I think Reform is a vessel, it's a vehicle.
But you told people to vote for Reform, Matt. There's no point backing away from what you did. You told people to vote for Reform. It's the most elite party in the UK. It has 5 MPs. 4 of the 5 Reform Party MPs are Richard Tice, private schoolboy, multimillionaire CEO. Nigel Farage, private schoolboy, city trader. Rupert Lowe, private schoolboy, investment banker. James McMurdoch, investment banker. I found your elite, Matt. They're called the Reform Party.
It's also...
I mean, they are.
Very good. It's also got...
they are, aren't they?
The Reform Party's also got a more working-class electorate than the Labour Party.
What about the people in Parliament?
Of course they're elite. Of course they're elites in the party.
Finally, we can agree.
But it's not... As you know, politics in this country is broken. Both of the big parties are not speaking to the values of ordinary people.
Your definition of ordinary people is different to mine. Let's go to the panel who are waiting patiently. Zoe Gardner is an immigration policy expert, campaigner for migrant rights. Zoe, do you recognise this idea of a new elite shaping the national conversation? What do you think?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, didn't you? Because he's excluding everybody with real financial and political power from his definition of the new elite. The reality is that almost in the entirety of our media ecosystem in the UK is owned by literally a small handful of billionaire men, right? One example would be Paul Marshall. He's the majority share owner of GB News, your spiritual home. He just bought The Spectator magazine, but all of us ordinary people have felt the pinch, have felt that we're getting poorer. He's now a billionaire, and he has been shown to share really radical extremist and nasty racist content online. He is the type of person who has the real power to set the agenda of the narrative in the UK. What you're talking about, the idea that the left sets the narrative on migration in the UK, it's just not realistic for anybody who's opened a newspaper in the last...
This is where it gets absolutely beautiful. Matthew just told people to vote for Reform Party, right? He's been positioning them as the party of ordinary working people fighting against the elite. So Medi does what Medi does best. He brings the receipts. 4 out of 5 Reform Party MPs, Richard Tice, private school multimillionaire CEO, Nigel Farage, private school city trader, Rupert Lowe, private school investment banker, James McMurdoch, investment banker. Medi literally found Matthew's elite. They're called the Reform Party. The party of the people is led entirely by private school investment bankers. And Matthew's response? Well, they've got a more working-class electorate than Labour. That's not the point. You can't define elite by education and wealth and Oxbridge connections, and then completely ignore it when it's your guys. Either investment bankers are elite or they're not. You don't get to pick and choose based on whether they agree with you. Then Zoe Gardiner comes in with the real analysis. She names Paul Marshall, majority shareholder of GB News, just bought The Spectator, now a billionaire while the rest of us are getting poorer, sharing racist, extremist content online. This is someone with actual power to set the national agenda. And notice how he's completely absent from Matthew's definition of elite? The pattern is so clear now. Billionaire media owners shaping public opinion? Not elite. Investment bankers running a political party? Not elite. But a TV presenter who does math puzzles and a footballer who tweets progressive opinions? That's the dangerous elite we need to worry about. The double standard is just, it's right there in the open.
30 years.
I'm going to bring in both other panelists and get you to respond to all three. David Goodhart is the founder, former editor of Prospect magazine. He's now at the Policy Exchange think tank. David, you've written about elites as well in the past, if I remember correctly. I know you live in London. You went to Eton. You studied at what is now a Russell Group University. You've had an influential role in the media. Do you think you're a member of the new elite or the old elite?
Well, kind of like you two. I'm a kind of mixture of the two. I mean, you're private school and Oxbridge,
I am.
If I'm right. Matt is a more kind of meritocratic figure than you in many ways. I mean, I wrote a book a few years ago called The Road to Somewhere, in which I talked about the people that see the world from anywhere and the people that see the world from somewhere. And I think that is quite an important, quite a useful sort of social psychological way of looking at, at populism.
But you didn't answer my question, though.
The anywheres are a minority, overwhelmingly highly educated, mobile, believe in openness and autonomy. Somewheres tend to be much more rooted. Their identities are much more connected to place and group, so they're much more discomforted by radical change. And both the worldviews, the more liberal worldview of the anywheres is perfectly decent and legitimate, as is the worldview of the somewheres. The problem is the anywheres have been over-dominant in our society for the last 30 years.
Taj, you were with Tribune magazine. You're on the left of politics. Matt thinks the left is cultural left, dominant, powerful. Do you, A, agree with that? And B, what do you make of the argument that Zoe mentioned as well about it's the billionaires who are getting away with not being scrutinised while we focus on Gary Lineker and
When we talk about elites, we're talking about class here. We're talking about people struggling to put a roof over their heads, money in their pockets, food on the table. That's what annoys people about the elites, that there is one way of living for them and one way of living for the over 160 billionaires in this country that have a lot of money. Now, if you want to tackle elites, why are we not talking about taxing the rich? Why are we not talking about redistribution? Why are we not talking about investing in many of those communities that are still rioting?
No,
we're talking about culture wars because we don't want to talk about class. We would rather talk about culture wars. We'd rather try and play this game of division and the blame game, rather than dealing with the central issue that for many, many years we have seen a lack of investment in working class communities. So the wealthiest in society are getting away with a lot and we're not holding them to account. I want to tackle the elite as much as everyone else, but that's not what we are talking about.
So Zoe and Taj, are both suggesting that you are focused on culture wars, not redistribution of wealth, and it's partly to protect people like Sir Paul Marshall, who own GB News, that you appear on. You don't talk about him as an elite member.
Yeah. Well, firstly, I would disagree with the characterisation of Paul Marshall, who I do know, and he doesn't.
Is he not a billionaire?
He doesn't share those views that you.
He did on social media, Matt. You know this.
You know
he's shared Islamophobic tweets on social media.
I think David hit the nail on the head when he said the problem we have today is that the elite that I'm talking about represent about 20% of the country. If you look at the British Social Attitude Survey, people tend to forget this in London. Only 20% of Brits are strongly and consistently liberal on lots of issues. Yet if you were to look at the national conversation or the policies that are passed...
Come on, Matt, you're cherry-picking again. The vast majority of the public agree with what Taj just said. They support redistribution.
I'm just going to come to that.
Public ownership.
I'm going to come to that. Those overwhelmingly reflect the liberal priorities of this new ruling class. The issue, and I agree with everything Taj said, actually. If you read this book, I'm very critical of things like Thatcher's economic legacy, for example, but there's a difference. The new elite are also advocating beliefs because of their class. Instead of deriving status from money and wealth, they now derive their status from these luxury beliefs, like, well, let's preach radical gender ideology to children. Let's defund or scale back the police, or let's have loose, open borders.
Let's go to our audience who've been waiting patiently here in London's Conway Hall. Raise your hand.
Taj Ali just cut through all the noise with one simple question. If you want to tackle elites, why aren't we talking about taxing the rich? Why aren't we talking about the 160 billionaires in this country? Why aren't we talking about redistribution and investment in working-class communities? Because that's the real issue, isn't it? Matthew wants to talk about culture wars, gender ideology, defunding police, open borders. He wants us angry at Carol Vorderman instead of angry at the people who crashed the economy, extracted wealth from our communities, and left us fighting over scraps. Taj is absolutely right. We're talking about class here. We're talking about people struggling with rent, food, heating bills. And the billionaires are getting away with everything because we're too busy fighting about whether Gary Lineker should be allowed to tweet. David Goodhart tries to intellectualize it with his anywheres versus somewheres framework. But even that misses the point. The problem isn't that educated mobile people believe in openness. The problem is that neither group has any power compared to the people who actually own everything. Matthew claims only 20% of Brits are consistently liberal, but policies reflect liberal priorities. Okay, let's test that. Do our policies reflect liberal priorities on worker rights, on taxing wealth, on public ownership, on housing? No! They reflect the priorities of the wealthy. Low taxes on capital, weak unions, privatization, deregulation. The genius of this whole culture war elite argument is it lets the actual elites, the ones with the money and power, completely off the hook. We're supposed to be mad at university professors and TV presenters while billionaires strip our country for parts. And Matthew is standing there fresh from speaking at Rothschild and Goldman Sachs, telling US we're the problem. So what do you think of this? Leave your thoughts in the comment section below, and please don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.